A mile of icy abyss, and a single second, the difference between triumph and death. On September 26, 2022, Manaslu, the mountain of the spirit, claimed not a novice, but a living icon, Hilaree Nelson, captain of the North Face team. She had survived the death zone on Everest, and was the first person in the world to ski down Lhotse. So why, at the peak of her fame, in perfect weather, did a tiny slab of snow become her death sentence? And what's it like to watch your partner disappear into a chasm, completely powerless to do a thing? Rain, fog, and snow as heavy as wet cement. This is the harsh reality of the Cascade Mountains. While other kids are learning on sunny, groomed slopes, a 3-year-old Hilaree Nelson clicks into her first pair of skis under the leaden skies of Seattle at Stevens Pass. Her parents, Stan and Robin, don't try to shield her from the elements. Here in Washington State, the conditions make the rules. The snow is thick and sticky. It grabs at your skis, throws you off balance, and soaks your clothes in an instant. But this aggressive environment becomes her greatest training ground. Every battle with the heavy snow forges her unique technique and a phenomenal sense of balance. She learns a crucial lesson early on. There's no point in waiting for perfect weather. You have to work with what nature gives you, right here and now. But her iron will wasn't forged only on the slopes. At Shorewood High School, she swaps her ski boots for sneakers and hits the court as the captain of the basketball team. The pressure is immense. Hilaree leads her team through a grueling season to a historic achievement: 23 wins and only 2 losses, a state record. Team sports teach her things you can't learn from a textbook. She learns the value of discipline and teamwork. It's here she truly understands that success depends on every link in the chain, and that leadership, above all, is about responsibility. These skills would become the very foundation upon which her most challenging expeditions would later be built. After high school, she enrolls at Colorado College, dives into her studies, and earns a degree in biology. It seemed like her life was all mapped out: science, a stable job, a predictable future. But that diploma in her hand doesn't feel like a ticket to a 9-to-5. It feels like the starting gun for something else entirely. The moment she graduates, she feels the lab walls closing in. Hilaree makes a decision that shatters all expectations. She's ready for a radical change of scenery, ready to take a leap into the unknown. The year is 1995. She has a one-way ticket to France in her pocket, and a mind filled with nothing but a thirst for freedom and snow. Hilaree lands in Chamonix, the mecca of global mountaineering, with a simple plan: spend one season, ski her heart out, and then return to a normal life. But the mountains have their own plans for those who dare to answer their call. That one season stretches into 5 long years, completely rewriting her destiny. Chamonix isn't just a resort with cozy cafes. It's a brutal proving ground, a daily test of your mettle. She's thrown into a completely different environment, surrounded by the world's elite, people for whom risk is just part of the daily grind. The atmosphere is both crushing and exhilarating. Hilaree quickly realizes her old skills won't cut it here. The safe, marked slopes are a distant memory. Her world now is one of wild glaciers, deep crevasses, and steep couloirs, where one mistake costs you everything. Skis are no longer just for getting down the mountain. They're a tool for survival. She learns to manage ropes, drive ice screws, and read the terrain like a pro. This isn't just skiing anymore. It's pure ski mountaineering. The learning curve is steep and unforgiving, but effective. The skills she developed in the heavy, wet snow of the Cascades are now honed to a new, deadly precision on the knife edge of the Alps. Just a year after her arrival, in 1996, she enters the European Extreme Skiing Championship. Nobody's betting on the American, but she showcases an aggressive and technical style that leaves the competition behind. Her victory makes a loud statement. She proves she can't just survive on complex terrain, she can dominate it. This success immediately grabs the industry's attention. Sponsors start eyeing the daring athlete, who seems as comfortable on vertical ice as most people are on a sidewalk. Then, in 1999, a key moment. Hilaree signs her first professional contract with the industry giant, the North Face. From this point on, there's no going back. The recent college graduate and ski enthusiast is gone. In her place stands a world-class professional athlete, ready for the most ambitious projects on the planet. The contract with a global brand is signed, but instead of resting on her laurels in comfortable Europe, she unfolds a map of the world and starts looking for the blank spaces. The familiar Alps suddenly feel too small. Hilaree craves real exploration, the kind you find in places without rescue helicopters or cozy huts with hot chocolate. In 2002, she packs her gear and heads for Mongolia, to the wild, remote Altai mountain range. This is no longer just a sport, it's a true expedition into the unknown. Here, time seems to stand still. There's nothing but vast steppes and rugged peaks, revered as sacred by the local people. The goal is ambitious, to ski all 5 of the sacred peaks of Tavan Bogd. No one had ever dared to carve a line down these slopes before. She stands on the summit, the wind nearly knocking her over, and gazes down. Local herders watch in disbelief. To them, her skis look like a tool from another world. Hilaree drops in, becoming a true pioneer. The snow is unpredictable, the terrain unfamiliar, but she makes her way down, leaving the first ski tracks in the history of these mountains. But the wide open spaces of Mongolia only whet her appetite. In 2005, she decides it's time to test her vertical limits. Her eyes turn to the Himalayas. The target? Cho Oyu, the 6th highest peak on the planet. This is more than just mountains now. This is the 8,000-meter zone, a territory where the human body operates on the brink of failure. Her team includes legendary telemark skier Kasha Rigby and veteran mountaineer Willie Benegas. The stakes couldn't be higher. Hilaree makes a critical decision. She'll climb without supplemental oxygen. At that altitude, every breath is a struggle. Your lungs are on fire, and your brain is starved by hypoxia. The climbers around her look like astronauts in their oxygen masks, but she chooses to climb in pure style. Step by agonizing step, dragging the leaden weight of her legs, she reaches the summit. The world is at her feet, but the hardest part is yet to come. Most climbers barely have the energy to walk down, but Hilaree clicks into her skis. Skiing an 8,000er demands superhuman focus. One wrong move, amplified by exhaustion, could be fatal. She glides down, cutting through the thin air. Her skis bite into the hard-packed snow, each turn requiring a colossal effort. Her successful descent from Cho Oyu is her ticket to the major leagues. It's now crystal clear. She's not just a skier who got lucky and went high. She is an elite, high-altitude athlete, capable of operating at the absolute limit of human potential. Imagine an icy wasteland where granite walls rise for thousands of feet, straight out of a frozen ocean. This is Baffin Island, and here, in 2007, Hilaree Nelson faces a challenge on a whole new level. This time, she's not just a participant on a guided trip. She is the engine and the brains of the entire operation. Hilaree is leading an all-female expedition into one of the most severe corners of the Arctic. Her partner is Ingrid Backstrom, an incredible skier known for her movie parts, but the weight of the team's survival in this completely autonomous setting rests squarely on Nelson's shoulders. There's no one around for hundreds of miles, just polar bears and a biting wind that slices through even the best technical gear. Their mission sounds crazy. Find and ski couloirs as narrow as the eye of a needle, wedged between sheer rock faces. These are places where the sun only appears for a couple of hours a day, and the temperature rarely gets above -20. Hilaree is in charge of all the logistics and strategy. She plots the routes, analyzes the snowpack, and makes the crucial calls: push forward or turn back. In the past, she'd often followed the lead of seasoned pros like Willie Benegas. Now, that safety net is gone. If anything goes wrong, she can only rely on herself and her partner. Every morning starts with studying maps and weather reports. Every step across the glacier is meticulously planned, and they find their lines. The team pulls off a series of daring first descents in couloirs where no human has been before. The slopes are so steep that the snow is barely hanging on, and a fall means a guaranteed collision with the rocks below. But Hilaree leads with a calm confidence. She displays a phenomenal mountain sense, reading the terrain like an open book. The success of this expedition completely changes her standing in the professional community. Baffin Island is her graduation, her master's thesis in leadership. She proves to everyone, and especially to herself, that she can build the most complex projects from the ground up. She's no longer just the skier they bring along for the glamour shots. She's a versatile athlete who can survive the Arctic cold, drag heavy sleds over sea ice, and make life-or-death decisions under pressure. Nelson's reputation as a self-reliant and dependable leader is set in stone, opening the door to even greater challenges. Imagine running a marathon while breathing through a thin cocktail straw, with a heavy pack on your shoulders. That's what every single movement feels like in the death zone, where there's catastrophically little oxygen to support life. But for Hilaree Nelson in 2012, even that ordeal wasn't going to be enough. After the Arctic solitude of Baffin Island, she takes on a challenge from the legendary Conrad Anker, joining a massive expedition with the University of Montana. On paper, the goal is academic, scientific research into geology and human physiology at extreme altitude. But behind the dry reports lies an ambitious plan, one bordering on insane, to attempt a double, linking the planet's two highest peaks in a single, continuous push. On the 25th of May, 2012, Hilaree is standing on top of the world. Mount Everest, 8,848 meters. Below her, the entire globe. Above, the blackness of space. For most climbers, this is a moment of relief, their thoughts turning to a safe descent back to a warm camp. But for Nelson, this is only halfway. She glances at her watch. Time is working against her. Instead of resting, she begins her descent to the South Col, but doesn't stop at the tents. She turns towards the neighboring giant, Lhotse. Her body, exhausted from the Everest ascent, is screaming for a break, but Hilaree forces herself to keep moving. This is no longer just mountaineering. It's a race for survival against her own physiology. The traverse to Lhotse demands absolute focus. She has to regain altitude, pushing up a steep, ice-covered couloir on the world's fourth highest peak, 8,516 meters. Her lungs are on fire. Every step takes an act of will, like lifting a heavy barbell. She moves through a haze of fatigue, balancing on the edge of consciousness. The day isn't over yet. Within that same day, in a single 24-hour window, she steps onto the second summit. Hilaree Nelson has done the impossible. She becomes the first woman in history to pull off this deadly double in a single day. This achievement rewrites the book on human endurance. She proves that the human body can function in extreme conditions for far longer than science ever thought possible. At this moment, she is at the peak of her physical form and global fame, completely confident in her abilities, with no idea of the price the mountains will demand for this triumph just a few hours later. The euphoria of the world record vanishes in an instant, giving way to the brutal physics of the descent. At 8,000 meters, with her body depleted by 24 hours of non-stop exertion, every movement is a lottery. Hilaree starts down, but the mountain doesn't forgive even a second's loss of concentration. One awkward move on the hard-packed snow, and her foot twists at an unnatural angle. A sharp pain shoots through her ankle, signaling a catastrophe. This isn't just a sprain. The ligaments holding the joint together can't take the strain, and they tear. In any other situation, this would mean a stretcher and an immediate evacuation. But here, in the death zone, there's no one to call for help. She knows that if she stops, the cold and exhaustion will finish her off faster than the injury. This begins the longest descent of her life. Hilaree has to do what seems impossible. Put weight on her broken ankle, step by step, down the icy face of Lhotse. Each step sends a flash of blinding pain, but she blocks out the signals with sheer force of will. She becomes a machine with a single program, down, towards life. She descends on her own, refusing to be a burden to her team, demonstrating an unbelievable level of resilience. But when the adrenaline of the fight with the mountain fades, the true cost of her achievement becomes clear. Doctors confirm severe ligament tears. The verdict is harsh, a long period of immobilization and months of grueling rehabilitation. Her world of swift descents and endless horizons shrinks to the size of a room and a physical therapist's office. For a person used to living in constant motion, this forced stillness becomes a torture worse than mountain sickness. The days drag on, agonizingly slow. While her body fights to recover, her mind is attacked by doubt. This downtime forces Hilaree to take off the rose-tinted glasses of success and look in the mirror. She starts asking herself the hard questions. Is the risk worth these consequences? Will she ever be able to return to her previous level? Or was her peak left behind on the summit of Lhotse? The injury knocks the ground out from under her, not just physically, but mentally, forcing a reevaluation of her life's priorities. Her confidence in her own invincibility cracks, and in that quiet moment, a fear is born. The fear that her career as an elite mountaineer might end right here, right now, trapped in a cast. 2014. Forget the sterile white snow and crisp air of the Himalayas. Hilaree Nelson throws herself into the green inferno of Myanmar, leading an expedition under the National Geographic flag. The objective sounds like a geographical puzzle. The peak of Hakakabo Razi. No one knows for sure if this mountain is the highest point in Southeast Asia, and her team's mission is to carry GPS equipment to the summit and settle the debate once and for all. But the mountain guards its secrets with a ring of impenetrable jungle. The team faces a trial you can't prepare for in a gym. They have to trek a 100-mile approach on foot through a wild forest, where trails exist only in the imagination of cartographers, and every step is a battle against vines and mud. The jungle saps their strength before the climb even begins. Food supplies dwindle at an alarming rate. The group is caught in the grip of starvation, with daily rations cut to a handful of rice. Their bodies begin to consume themselves, muscles weaken, and minds become clouded. As they gain altitude, the cold sets in. Wet clothes turn into a shell of ice, and hypothermia becomes a real threat. The physical suffering inevitably takes a toll on their psyche. Tension builds within the team. People who are supposed to work as a single unit start to break down. Conflicts flare up, and arguments over the route and the remaining food poison the atmosphere. Hilaree watches as the expedition falls apart before her eyes. They're high on a ridge. The summit teases them, so close it's almost within reach. The temptation to risk everything for success is immense. The sponsors are waiting for a result. The world is waiting for a story. But Hilaree looks at her companions, at their sunken eyes and trembling hands. She understands. One more push upward could be a one-way ticket for the entire group. In that moment, the ambitions of a professional athlete give way to the wisdom of a captain. She makes the hardest decision of her career, to turn back. They retreat, leaving the summit unclimbed. To many, it looks like a failure. The grant money is spent, the goal isn't achieved, the reports are blank. But it's this very failure that becomes the foundation of her new philosophy. Myanmar teaches her a brutal but necessary lesson in humility. Hilaree learns a fundamental truth. A mountain is just rock and ice, but human life is priceless. The safety of the team must always come before any records or titles. The experience shatters her ego, but it makes her a stronger leader. She returns from the jungle a different person, ready to make decisions without worrying about outside expectations. After the suffocating, energy-draining jungles of Myanmar, Hilaree finds a new source of strength, not in solitude, but in partnership. Jim Morrison enters her life, a man whose pulse beats in unison with her own. It's more than just friendship or romance. It's a fusion of two world-class professionals who understand the language of risk without words. They are united by a shared obsession, not just to stand on summits, but to ski impossible lines down them. In 2015, this new duo decides to test their mettle on one of the most formidable giants of the Himalayas, Manaslu. The world's fifth highest peak greets them with a shell of ice and winds strong enough to blow a person into the abyss. Their plan is audacious, to complete a full ski descent from the summit, but the mountain quickly makes its own adjustments. Above 8,000 meters, the snow has been scoured away by the wind, exposing blue ice as hard as concrete and rock. Skis are useless here. Any attempt to start from the peak would be certain death. Years of experience tell them they have to adapt. Instead of banging their heads against the wall of impossibility, they find an alternative, the Manaslu Le Couloir. Hilaree clicks into her bindings where the air is so thin that every movement requires a conscious act of will. Below her lie thousands of feet of highly technical terrain. This isn't the soft powder of a ski commercial. This is technical, unforgiving ski mountaineering, where a single mistake in a turn could be fatal. She glides down, controlling her speed at the very limit of her physical ability, and becomes the first woman in history to ski this route. This descent becomes the moment of truth for their partnership. The Manaslu expedition, despite abandoning the original plan, reveals the immense potential of their duo. They realize that together, they can work faster and more efficiently than large, cumbersome teams. Their signature style is born, fast and light. No massive caravans, minimal waiting, maximum mobility. They move as a single organism, trusting each other completely. Manaslu becomes the proving ground, where they forge a style that will soon allow them to take on projects considered absolute fantasy in the world of mountaineering. 18 years. That's how long the ghost of Mount Papsura has lived in her head, giving her no peace, day or night. It's a beautiful and deadly pyramid in the Indian Himalayas, which the locals, with superstitious awe, call the Peak of Evil. For Hilaree, this is her personal Moby Dick. She first saw the peak in '99, fell in love with its perfect lines, and in 2013 she attempted it, but the mountain brutally rejected her. That defeat left a deep scar on her pride. And now, in 2017, with the experience of Manaslu behind her and the support of Jim Morrison by her side, she returns to settle the score, once and for all. This time, she looks at the summit not as a dreamer, but as a predator, ready for the final pounce. They stand on a needlepoint summit, over 6,000 meters high. Below, a wall plummets away, so steep the very sight of it is dizzying. A 3,000-foot vertical drop, a 60-degree pitch. To give you a sense of just how insane this is, on a slope this steep, snow can barely cling to the surface, and any fall means a one-way trip to the bottom, with zero chance of stopping. This isn't skiing anymore. It's a controlled fall into the abyss. Hilaree is about to do something no one in history has ever done before. Ski this wall from the absolute peak to the base. The first few meters of the descent are a technical puzzle. The summit is sheathed in what's known as bottle ice. So hard you can't even get an edge in. The risk of slipping here isn't just high, it's 100%. Hilaree has no choice but to use a rope for safety. She navigates the first 30 meters with the care of a bomb disposal expert, trusting her life to the rope and her partner. But the moment the ice gives way to snow, she unclips her carabiner. Now, it's just her and the mountain. And in that moment, the Peak of Evil reveals its true nature. The weather turns in an instant. Clouds swallow the face in a thick blanket of white, and visibility drops to absolute zero. She is hurtling down a wall with an insane pitch, completely blind to where she'll land in the next second. All landmarks vanish, leaving only the pull of gravity and muscle memory. She's flying through a white void, relying on nothing but the intuition she's honed over years of training. Hilaree carves turns in the whiteout, dropping through one couloir after another. When her skis finally touch the gentler slope at the bottom, the tension releases. She's done it. The gestalt that had haunted her for nearly 2 decades was finally closed. She was the first person in the world to carve her signature down the face of the Peak of Evil, turning an old fear into her greatest triumph. 2 weeks. That's all the time that passes between her triumph in sweltering India and her landing on a glacier in freezing Alaska. Most professional athletes would take a month off on a beach to recover after an expedition as grueling as the Peak of Evil. But Hilaree Nelson defies the logic of rest. She channels the momentum from her success as fuel. Her body is now a perfectly tuned machine, and her blood is so rich with oxygen after the Himalayas that she doesn't need to acclimatize. She arrives at the base of Denali, the highest point in North America, not as a visitor who needs to get used to the altitude, but as someone who owns the place. This isn't a gradual expedition, it's a full-on blitz. She bypasses the standard tourist route, where hundreds of people drag sleds along a well-worn path. Her objective is the Kassin Ridge. It's a legendary, technically demanding line that requires serious alpinism, ice tool proficiency, and rock climbing skills. Hilaree ascends the route at a pace that seems impossible to an outside observer. She moves upward with a terrifying efficiency, as if she feels none of the fatigue from the preceding weeks. The summit of Denali, at 6,190 meters, falls without a long siege. But, as always in her style, the ascent is just the prelude to the main event. At the top, she clicks into her skis. Below her awaits the Messner Couloir, an iconic line that many ski mountaineers dream of, but few dare to attempt. It's a gigantic, snow-filled chute, visible for miles, and it demands absolute control. The snow here is hard, wind-blasted, and unforgiving. Hilaree descends the couloir with phenomenal technique. She's linking turns in places where most climbers would be cautiously picking their way down on crampons. In this moment, she solidifies her unique status as an all-rounder, equally brilliant climbing vertical rock as she is skiing steep, icy faces. But the most astonishing thing about this Alaskan marathon isn't the success itself. For Hilaree and Jim Morrison, this insane pace, these 2 summits on different continents in a single month, it's all just training. It's a dress rehearsal. They are testing their bodies to the absolute limit, checking their gear and their teamwork under conditions of critical exhaustion. This whole marathon, this kaleidoscope of victories and flights, serves one overarching purpose. They are preparing for a project that is meant to be the defining work of their lives, and Alaska is merely the proving ground to sharpen their skills for the final performance. 600 meters of a narrow, icy chute, dropping into the void right from under her feet. This is the Lhotse Couloir, one of the most aesthetic and terrifying lines in high-altitude mountaineering. It was for this very moment, for this insane geometry of snow and rock, that Hilaree had been training in Alaska. Now she stands before her Magnum opus, the great work of her life. Her goal is ambitious and crystal clear, to complete the first ever ski descent from the true summit of the world's fourth highest mountain. Daredevils had tried to ski it before, but they all started from lower, safer points, leaving the very top of the mountain untouched. Hilaree, however, intends to ski a continuous line from the peak to the base, with no compromises. To pull this off, she takes a huge tactical risk. The entire world climbs in the Himalayas in the spring, when the weather is stable. But in spring, the Lhotse Couloir is a wind-scoured sheet of blue ice and bare rock. Hilaree chooses autumn, the post-monsoon season. At this time, the mountains are buried in snow. This makes a ski descent possible, but it exponentially increases the avalanche danger and requires breaking trail through waist-deep powder at an altitude where every step is a battle. On September 30th, 2018, she and Jim Morrison are standing at 8,516 meters. Here, in the thin air of the death zone, a surreal scene unfolds. Normally, climbers snap a photo and rush back down. Hilaree, however, begins to click into her ski bindings right on the summit, balancing on a patch of snow no bigger than a dinner table. Any mistake while buckling her boot could send her on a multi-kilometer fall. The click of her binding sounds like a starting pistol. She makes her first turn. Her skis bite into the snow on a 50-degree slope. The couloir is so narrow that the walls feel like they're squeezing her shoulders. She descends, managing the sloughs of powder snow that break loose from under her skis with every turn. It's a dance on a razor's edge, demanding absolute control. Her legs are burning, her lungs gasp for air, but she keeps moving, linking turn after turn in a perfect rhythm. She skis 7,000 vertical feet, all the way down to Camp 2. When her skis finally glide to a stop on the flat glacier, history has been rewritten. This descent becomes the crowning achievement of her career, proof that for her, no line is impossible. The Lhotse descent doesn't just cap off her season, it causes a tectonic shift in Hilaree's career. In a world where success is often measured in likes and views, she earns recognition that carries the real weight of gold. National Geographic, the highest authority for any explorer, names her their 2018 Adventurer of the Year. It's basically the Oscars of the mountaineering world. The title elevates her from a niche sports specialist to a global figure. Now, her name is known not just by those who understand crampons and ice axes, but by a mainstream audience. But with the award comes a new responsibility, one of immense scale. The industry giant The North Face makes a move that many call historic. For years, the position of global athlete team captain was held by Conrad Anker, a living icon, a man whose name is synonymous with alpinism. When Anker decides to step back, a vacuum is created. Who could possibly replace such a monument? The answer is unexpected for the old guard, but obvious to anyone who had been watching Hilaree. She becomes the new captain. For the first time in the brand's history, a woman holds the position. This isn't just a changing of the guard, it's a shattering of stereotypes. Hilaree embraces the role of a leader, becoming the face and voice for an entire generation of extreme athletes. For her, power and status aren't for vanity. They are tools for influence. She doesn't lock her secrets away, but actively begins to share her experience. Hilaree takes young talents like Emily Harrington under her wing, passing on not just technical skills, but the psychology of survival in the big mountains. She becomes a mentor, proving that there is a place for female solidarity in this tough, male-dominated world. At the same time, she enters another fight, a fight for the very future of her sport. Hilaree understands that the glaciers where she built her career are disappearing at an alarming rate. She joins the advocacy group Protect Our Winters. The athlete transforms into an activist, using her public platform to speak out about climate change. She testifies in Washington, D.C., lobbies for environmental laws, and calls her community to action. By this point, Hilaree Nelson is no longer just a skier making audacious descents. She is a multifaceted figure, a matriarch of mountaineering, who manages to lead an elite team, raise a new generation of champions, and fight for the future of the planet, all while at the absolute peak of her influence and physical form. Listen to that sound. That's not the wind. It's the endless, monotonous drumbeat of rain on a tent fly in base camp. September 2022 greets climbers in Nepal not with crisp autumn air, but with a heavy, oppressive humidity. The monsoon, which should have retreated, seems to have clawed its way into the Himalayan peaks and refuses to leave. Manaslu, the world's 8th highest peak, is turning into a trap. Down below it's pouring rain, but up high, in the death zone, that rain becomes meters of fresh snow. The mountain is literally swelling before their eyes, accumulating tons of unstable weight on its steep slopes. The atmosphere in camp is electric with anxiety. Experienced guides stare grimly at the leaden sky, knowing that every hour of snowfall pushes the avalanche danger further into the red. Hilaree Nelson is here not as a tourist, but as the captain of the elite, a professional who can read the mountains better than most people read the morning paper. By her side is her constant partner, Jim Morrison. This team works like a single, well-oiled machine. They'd been through hell together on Lhotse and tackled the technical puzzles of Denali. Their experience allows them to see what's invisible to the novice. They can read the snowpack, feel where a slope will hold, and where it's ready to let go. But even their immense wealth of knowledge is up against the chaos of nature. This season, Manaslu is behaving like an unpredictable beast. Weather forecasts change every few hours, promising windows that slam shut before a team can even get their boots on. Alarming messages crackle over the radio. The rumble of avalanches can already be heard in the area. Somewhere above Camp 3, slabs of snow are breaking loose, sweeping away gear. These are classic red flags, signals that scream of danger. But high-altitude mountaineering has its own paradoxical logic. If you wait for perfect conditions, you could spend your whole life in a tent. Hilaree and Jim make a decision. They'll work with what they have. They're betting on their speed and their ability to move fast and light. They believe they can thread the needle between the weather's whims, using their ski mountaineering skills for a rapid descent. It's not an easy call. The air is thick with anxiety. Other expeditions are packing up or hunkering down to wait. But Nelson and Morrison keep moving up. They set out on the route, fully aware they're entering a game of probabilities. Under their feet, fresh, unsettled snow crunches, a beautiful but treacherous surface, hiding a layer of ice beneath. Every step upward is a risk weighed on an internal scale. They push on through a veil of clouds, climbing higher into a zone where the air thins and the slope's own physics cancels any right to make a mistake. September 26th. Imagine standing on a knife's edge, lifted to the cruising altitude of a jetliner. All around you is thin air, where you have to catch oxygen molecules like precious jewels. It's here, between 10:40 and 11:30 in the morning, that Hilaree Nelson and Jim Morrison take the final steps toward their goal. They don't stop at the 4 summit, where most commercial groups turn around. Their ambition carries them further, to the true summit of Manaslu, a tiny patch of snow at 8,163 meters. It's a moment of absolute triumph. The entire world lies far below, hidden by clouds, and the two of them share this dizzying height alone. It seems the hardest part is over. All that's left is what they came here to do, ski down. But the mountains don't do happy endings. The routine begins, something Hilaree has done thousands of times, switching from climbing to skiing. She's standing on a narrow crest, no wider than a balance beam. One move, and her skis touch the snow. In that moment, something happens that professionals call a slough. It's not even an avalanche in the usual sense, just a small slide of the top layer of loose snow, normally harmless on a wide slope. But here, on a critical pitch and a knife-edge ridge with zero room for error, this minor cascade of snow becomes fatal. Her ski loses its edge, the snow beneath her feet gives way, and in an instant, gravity takes over. Hilaree loses her balance. A single second stretches into an eternity. Instead of falling toward the uphill side, where she might have a chance to dig in with her ice axe, inertia throws her in the opposite direction. She's swept off the south face of the mountain. This is the wild, unexplored side of Manaslu, a sheer abyss with no established routes and no safety ropes. Jim Morrison is standing just a few meters away. He sees it happen, but the physics of an 8,000er are cruel. There's nothing he can do. The distance of an outstretched arm becomes an uncrossable chasm. He is frozen on the summit, a helpless witness to the catastrophe, as his partner's figure vanishes into the white void. The fall is agonizingly long. Hilaree plummets some 5,000 to 6,000 feet, more than a vertical mile down ice walls and rock ledges. The silence that follows is more deafening than any scream. The person who just stood on top of the world has disappeared into the heart of the mountain, leaving behind nothing but an empty ski track on the peak and a partner whose world has just collapsed in a single moment. The radio is silent, and that silence is more terrifying than any call for help. The moment she fell, all contact with Hilaree was lost, and the mountain fell into an information vacuum. Down below, in the world of the internet and breaking news, chaos erupts. The first headlines flashing across the globe are full of errors and false hope. Journalists report that she fell into a crevasse. This detail, like a game of telephone, changes the perception of the tragedy. A crevasse implies a chance of survival, the possibility of a rescue operation, a hope for a miracle. The world holds its breath, waiting for news of her recovery. But the reality on the mountain is far harsher than any news report. Those who were up there know. This wasn't a fall into a hole. It was a fall off a 1.5-kilometer high wall. An immediate search is impossible. Nature, it seems, drops a curtain, hiding the scene of the tragedy. The monsoon that had been tormenting the expedition for weeks delivers a final blow. The sky is sealed shut by a thick blanket of clouds. Snow begins to fall, and the helicopters are grounded. An agonizing wait begins. 2 days pass in complete uncertainty. The pilots smoke nervously, staring at the low cloud ceiling, as time works against them. Every minute of delay erases tracks on the slope, and fresh snow threatens to bury any trace of the great athlete. This is the torture of inaction. When the gear is ready, the people are ready, but the elements say no. Only on September 28th does the sky finally relent. A window opens. A Cymric Air helicopter lifts off from the pad and heads for the south face of Manaslu. On board, the silence is heavy. Jim Morrison is in the cabin. He has to do something you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. Fly over an abyss to find the body of the person he loves, his partner. Alongside him are the experienced pilot Captain Surendra Paudel and the renowned mountaineer Mingma Tenzi Sherpa. The crew's eyes scan the endless white canvas, trying to spot a tiny speck on the gigantic slope. The helicopter ascends along the presumed fall line. They survey areas where no human has ever set foot, and there, at an altitude of about 6,700 meters, among a jumble of ice and rock, a splash of color catches the eye. It's not a rock, not a shadow. Jim recognizes the gear. The helicopter hovers, fighting the thin air. There's no doubt. They find Hilaree far below the summit, on a cone of avalanche debris, where her final descent ended. The hope of a miraculous rescue from a crevasse is finally shattered against the harsh geometry of the south face. The rotor blades of the helicopter slice through the thick Kathmandu air, and the sound marks the end of the rescue operation. Hilaree Nelson's body is lifted from the slope, pulled from the icy grip of Manaslu, and brought to the city. The transition from the wild, deadly silence of the high mountains to the noise and dust of the capital is instantaneous. When the skids touch the ground, the last ghostly hope of a mistake vanishes. The official confirmation of her death, dry and bureaucratic, hits like a bombshell. The news rips across the planet faster than the wind on a summit ridge. From Chamonix to Colorado, from the offices of the North Face to the base camps in the Himalayas, the global mountaineering community freezes in shock. People accustomed to losing friends refuse to believe the mountains have taken her, the one who seemed eternal, invincible. On September 30th, mourning clothes replace bright technical gear. The scene shifts to the ancient Swayambhunath Monastery, also known as the Monkey Temple. Here, on a hill overlooking the Kathmandu Valley, the air is thick with the scent of juniper and incense. The farewell ceremony follows Buddhist traditions, in the very culture that Hilaree respected and considered a second home. Gathered around the funeral pyre are those closest to her: Jim Morrison, her climbing partners, friends, Sherpas, all those who knew the value of her smile at 8,000 meters. The fire consumes the body, freeing the spirit for a new journey, as the monotonous chanting of the monks drowns out the sobs. An era dissolves in the smoke of the funeral pyre. Hilaree Nelson leaves not just as a victim of an accident, but as a titan who forever changed the rules of the game. She leaves behind a legacy that can't be measured in meters of altitude alone. 40 of the most challenging expeditions in 16 countries. She laid down ski tracks where others were afraid to even walk. She proved that a woman could be not just a participant, but a leader, forging paths into the unknown. Her life was a continuous ascent, a search for the perfect line on the map. The story comes full circle. It began with wet snow in the Cascade Mountains and ended on the summit of one of the highest peaks on the planet. The mountains gave her everything: fame, love, a sense of purpose, and in the end, they took her for themselves. Her ashes mingle with the wind that blows toward the Himalayas. For Hilaree Nelson, there is no death in the usual sense, only an endless ascent that now continues in the memory of those who follow in her footsteps. She remains where her heart always was, among the eternal ice and the infinite sky.